Hello everyone. For this tutorial, we are going to learn how to get some keyboard and mouse events into our Alice program so we can make them even more interactive for our users. So we're going to open up our keyboard and mouse template off of Moodle, and I have that project open on my screen. So if you make sure you download that and open it here in Alice, then you can pick up and follow along with the video. So pause your video right now and make sure you go and download that Alice program. Okay, so now that we have the program opened, what we want to have happen is we want, when we click on the gates, that the gates will open. And we also want to be able to move our horse around using our keyboard. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work on clicking on the gates. So if you come up here to your hexagon and click on Castle Gate and then Castle Gate again, you are going to get all of the procedures, functions, properties listed for your Castle Gate. And right now we have nothing. Okay, so there are no procedures or functions for our Castle Gate. We are, however, going to add a property. Okay, and we are going to add a property that is going to be a Boolean property, and it is going to be called gates closed, because we want to have a property that tells us whether or not the gates are closed. And we are going to set it to true because when we first open our world, the gates are closed, so we want that to be true. So we're going to say OK. So now we have a gates closed property. It is a Boolean and it is true. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to add a Castle Gate procedure. So you can go ahead and click Add Procedure, and we're going to call it Open Gates. Okay, so this is going to be a procedure that will open up the castle gates when necessary. Okay, so we are going to use an if statement in this procedure. So we are going to drag our if statement onto the screen, and then we are just going to go ahead and select this gate's closed. And so what that's saying is if this gate's closed, if our gate's closed property is true, then run whatever's under the if. And so remember, by default, we set it to being true. So when our program first runs, it will think that the gates are closed, okay, which they are. Okay, so if it's closed, when we click on it, we're going to want it to open. So we're going to drag a do together up here and underneath our if statement. And we're going to come over here to our drop-down menu, and we're going to get our left gate. And we want it to open our left gate, so we're going to drag our turn method over, and we're going to select right, and we're going to select 0.5. And then we're going to do the same thing where we're going to get our right gate, but with our right gate, instead of turning it right, we're going to turn it left 0.5. Okay, so that's going to open our gates if they are closed. The other thing that we have to do is we have to change our gates from being set as closed to set as open, because once they open up, they're going to be open. So we're going to take our set gates closed over here in our procedures. Notice that I clicked over here and I selected this. So I don't have my left gate, I don't have my right gate selected, I just have my gates selected. I'm going to drag this set gates closed right underneath my code, and I'm going to change it to false. It was true because the gates were closed. Now we've turned our left gate and turned our right gate, so now the gates are open. So we've set this to false. Okay. Now we also need something under our else, because if it's not true, then we don't want them to open. So I'm going to copy this code, this whole do together block, and then that way I can just modify it. And so if they're open, when we click on it, we want the gates to close. So I'm going to hold down my Alt or my Option key, click, and drag this block underneath my else. But this time I'm just going to flip-flop everything. So instead of right, it's going to be left. Instead of left, it'll be right. And then instead of false, it'll be true. So we now have our open gates procedure all set. Okay. So what we have done so far is we've created a property called gates closed. It's a Boolean. We've set it to true. That tells us that our gates are closed when our program first opens. The next thing that we did was we created a procedure for our gate that says if the gates are closed, we're going to open them. If they're open, we're going to close them. So normally we would come to my first method and we would call our procedure. But we want this to happen when we click on the gates. So we are going to go to our Initialize Event Listeners tab, and that's where this code is going to go. And so you'll notice that the first thing that happens in our scene is it runs my first method. So it's going to run any code that we have in my first method. We don't have anything in there, so it's not worried about that. We can also add other activation listeners in here. So we are going to work with our mouse. So we're going to click Add Event Listener, okay? Go down to Mouse, and then we're going to click on the top one, Add Mouse, click on Object Listener. Okay, so what this is going to do is we're going to set it up so if we click on the gate, then we can call our Open Gates procedure. And so we are going to drag an if statement into our mouse clicked procedure. And we're just going to select true. Okay. And you're going to notice we have three different options here: get screen from left, get screen from bottom, or we have get model at mouse location. We're going to click on that. Second, we have to do one other thing first, sorry. We have to choose our relational S thing. This means we're going to be comparing where two different things are at. And so we're going to choose the equals, and I'm going to choose Castlegate, and then I'm just going to choose Castlegate again because the second one does not matter what I choose, because we want to know if our mouse is clicked anywhere on the Castlegate. So right now we have Castlegate, and then I'm going to come over, now I'm going to get this, sorry. I'm going to come over here to get this model at mouse location, and I'm going to drag that over one of my Castlegates. So now it's saying if this Castlegate equals wherever I've clicked my mouse. So if I've clicked my mouse and it's part of the Castlegate, then what do I want to happen? Okay, so that's what this one says. So inside of your if statement is where you're going to select your Castlegate. You can select it however you want. Click on it or on the drop down, and then we're going to call that Open Gates procedure. So I'm just going to drag that Castlegate Open Gates procedure. So what we've just done is we've created a mouse event. If the mouse is clicked on the Castlegate, then we're going to call this Castlegate procedure. So when I run my program, I've got my horse and my castle walls. If I click on my gates open. And then if I click on my gate again, they close. So when they are closed, when we click on them, it tells them to open. When they are open and we click on them, it tells them to close. Okay, so that's how you can create a mouse event, and you can do it in a lot of different ways. I will tell you sometimes it's a little particular about where you click. Like I'm clicking now and it doesn't really like it. So if you click right in certain spots, that's one thing that with Alice you can't get quite as technical about where to click. But we get the general idea, and it allows us to kind of allows us to have our user click and then certain code happen. Okay, so that's how we do a mouse click. Okay, so we added an event listener and then we put the code inside of there. And that is something that you can do in your final project, and it will add some interactivity to your project. The other thing we want to do is we want to be able to take this horse and we want to be able to move it with the keyboard. So if I press my up arrow, I want to be able to make the horse go forward and so on. So we're going to go to our Add Event Listener, and we're going to come down to Keyboard. And there are a couple different options that we're going to work with. Since we are going to be starting off with arrow keys, pressing forward, backward, we're going to choose the arrow key. If you were choosing letters, you do the key press. Okay, so you want to be careful about what you're picking. We're picking arrow keys, so we're going to select that. Okay, so this is going to be where we're going to put our arrow key. And I'm going to drag an if statement in there and select true. Now for this one, we need to specify which key is what. So I'm going to come in here And over on my right, I'm going to say if E is key, and then it's saying whatever key you're pressing, and I'm going to drag that over the true. And for this one, I want it to be, if it is a forward, or if it's the up arrow, then we're going to move forward. So we're going to choose if E is key up. So I got that from over here, and I put it right on top of my true, and then I selected my up arrow. Okay, and then what we want to happen is we're going to click on our horse, because we want our horse to move forward. So I'm going to click move, I'm going to select forward, I'm going to select 0.5, and then I'm also going to add detail, and I'm going to change it to begin, and the animation style to begin and end abruptly. That will just make it a little smoother when he's moving. So right now, if I run my program, I can click. I can also move my forward, or my horse forward. Okay, and that's all I can do so far. Okay, so we've got our gates, we've got our horse moving forward. The next thing that we're going to do is we are going to come into our else, and we're going to drag another if, because we want it to work for other keys as well. So we're going to come in here and we're going to set it up for our left key. So if it's my left arrow, and what do you suppose you want to happen if you press your left key? You want your horse to turn to the left. So I'm going to come get a turn, horse turn to the left, and I am going to choose 0.125, because if you choose something bigger, then it's hard to have them turn just small amounts. And so I'm going to do 0.125, and I'm going to do the animation style again. Begin gently and end abruptly. Okay. Oh, sorry, nope, that shouldn't say that. What am I doing? Begin and end abruptly. Losing my mind. Okay. So we've got it now. If I run it, I can still click on my gates. Okay, maybe. Click in the right spot. I can move forward. I can also turn left. Okay. So we see how we can do that. Okay, but I can't turn right and I can't go backwards. Okay. So I'm going to close out of that. We're going to add some more to our if statement. Drag another if in there. True. Get my E is key. This time I want him to be able to go backwards. And if it's backwards, I'm going to go down. So if I press the down arrow, my horse is going to move backwards. So I'm going to copy some code to make my life easier and change it to backward. Then I have one more direction I have to put in there. And you have to specify for these what key you're selecting. You can't just put it in the else, because otherwise he's going to move backwards. Or he's going to turn on every key that you press, so you have to specify. So for this one, we're doing turning right, correct? So we're going to do turn right, and the code's going to look very similar to your turn left, except it's going to be turn right. So if you don't have it all the way in, press pause so you can look at the screen here. But this is what it should look like with all your keys. Okay. Now when I run it, he moves forward, he turns left, he turns right, he can go backwards, okay? But it's still kind of herky-jerky. And so one other thing that you can do to kind of help with that, and I'm going to note right now, it's not going to be perfect using Alice. Alice is not a perfect software. But one thing that can help is you can come in here and you can choose for the multiple event policy, you can choose combine, and then you can also do the held key policy, and you can say fire multiple, which means he'll keep moving forward if you're pressing that up key and holding it down. So like if I hold it down, it just keeps going, okay? And then with our keys, it's supposed to kind of make it so it's not as bad when you're going from one to the next. And you can kind of do two at once. So if I'm pressing my up and my arrow, I can do that. Okay? So that's what we have so far. You've got your gates and you've got them moving up and down. Okay? Or not up and down, sorry. forward and backwards, left and right. Can you tell that I am just exhausted? Okay, so the last thing that we are going to do is we are going to add it so you can add a special key. So instead of like the arrow keys, if let's say we wanted the space bar to do something, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add one more event listener. I'm going to go to keyboard and I'm going to choose just add key press. So not arrow, not number, just add key press. And it's going to add that in there. And I am going to put an if statement in and choose true. And this time I'm going to come in here and do if E is a key. And notice it gives you arrow or letters, digits, arrows, but then it gives you custom key. If you click custom key, it brings this box up, and then you can just select which key. So if I press my space bar, it then says space. Okay? So now if the key is the space bar, then we could do something like we could have our horse jump or something like that. So let's see here. Let's have, if we press the space bar, we want to put in a do together, and we want our horse to move up 0.5 and to move forward 0.5. Okay, and then we also, if the horse is up, we need to make sure the horse comes back down. So I copy that, so then I could change it to down, and he can still move forward. So he's jumping, and as he's jumping up, he's moving forward, and as he's coming back down, he's still moving forward. So if your key is the space bar, he's going to move up and forward and then move down and forward. So if I press run now, if I'm just pressing my forward key, he's moving forward. If I'm pressing my back key, he moves backwards. If I press my space bar though, he moves forward. Okay, and same thing, if you don't want it to be as jerky, you can come into that animation style and you can change it to begin and end. That's not what I wanted. Begin and end abruptly. Okay, so that is always an option. It helps a little. Again, it's not going to be perfect. We are not like building with fancy software. So if I press my space bar, he goes up and down. Okay? And then I can make it so if I click my gates and they open up, then I could try to, oops, maybe I'm getting a little clicky happy. Oh, and I didn't mean to make him jump, and have him kind of try to get through that gate. Okay, and then jump, yay, made it. Okay, so that would be an example of how you could use keyboard and mouse events to add to a project and to make it more interactive for your user. And notice that all of that code goes right in here in your initialize event listeners. And so we added a mouse event, and we added an arrow key event, and we added a key press event. So that's important to know where those go, and they're right in here. You don't want to get rid of this. This right here tells it to run your my first method. So any of the code that you have elsewhere and that you put in your first method is going to run here. The only thing that we have in this initialize event listener that we've added are these things that run without special code in your my first method. So the mouse, when you click your mouse or press keys. But do not get rid of this scene activated at the top. Okay, so what you want to do, if you haven't already, is make sure that you have this saved. Okay, so save it in your flash drive so you have it to look back at, especially when you're working on your final project and you're trying to remember how to do some of this. You can look back and see what it looked like. Okay, so make sure it is saved before you close out of it.